Ladies and gentlemen, this is your final call. We'll now be closing the doors to the main conference hall. Ladies and gentlemen, please make your way into the main conference hall now. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats in the main conference hall now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your final call. We'll now be closing the doors to the main conference hall. Ladies and gentlemen, please make your way into the main conference hall now. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats in the main conference hall now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Professor of the Practice at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, Natalie Tocci.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, for this panel on European values, the European dream, or perhaps the European dreams, as we see in the title, under threat. Now, Europe, as we know, has a history, and it is no stranger to ideas and ideologies, some would say perhaps even values, of nationalism, of fascism, of colonialism. And yet Europe, in the post-war period, chose to define itself in opposition to that past. It chose to define itself on the basis of liberal values, of democracy, of human rights, of the rule of law, of multilateralism, of European integration. And so in this conversation, what we really want to be zooming into is what values exactly are we talking about, who are they being challenged by, and what should we do about this? Now, in order to discuss all this, please join me in welcoming on stage the Prime Minister of Croatia, Andrej Plenković, the Minister of Finance and Chair Designate of the Munich Security Council, Jens Stoltenberg. Jens, please. The Shadow Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, Priti Patel, please, welcome. And the chairwoman of the Greens here in Germany, Franziska Brandner. Franziska, please. So when the Munich Security Council asked me to moderate this panel, I didn't quite think that this theme was going to be such a central theme in this conference. And actually, it turned out to be. And what we heard many European leaders indeed talk about European values, about the European way of life. They made references indeed to democracy, to rights, to law. And yet we also heard another conception of Western values, of European values, really rooted in cultural tradition and heritage, in religion, and in history. And we heard this obviously particularly by Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday, referring to the West in general, obviously including Europe. So let me begin, in order to try and make sense with all of you, about all of this, with you, Prime Minister, and ask you, how do you interpret European values? What are we actually talking about here?
First of all, good day, and thank you, Natalie. Good day to the fellow panelists as well. Thanks to the MSC for another invitation. I think that the issue of the European values, the identity that sort of bonds us together, is a critical question in shaping, let's say, this new world order, which was the main topic of yesterday in the debates here. Coming from a political party whose political philosophy is center-right, the European People's Party, I think that there are a few main values which I'd like to underscore here. The first one is democracy. That is something that bonds all the European nations today. That's why we are the part of the world which is free with the values that we all share. Second is, of course, the rule of law, something that is the predominant value for all of us. The third one is the protection of human rights, which is critical to everything we do, and the equality among all our peoples and citizens. And of course, coming from center-right, of course, we appreciate a lot our Christian roots. This is something that is, when you ask me as a leader of the party, a prime minister for 10 years, these four pillars are what we stand for. And also the important element which Europe has is the stance towards international relations. I think our main position is the cooperative approach. The current world order basically is burdened by two approaches. Democracies, who have the cooperative approach to international relations, and authoritarian regimes that critically and unfortunately apply the conflictual approach. This is the main difference, and this is where the problems of the world arise today. So from that respect, these are the main values that we share, that I implement in a concept I call modern sovereignty in Croatia, which means strengthening the international position of the country in all possible ways: institutional, political, economic, geo-economic, strategic, energy-wise, which in turn strengthens the good and the well-being of my citizens, my nation, Croats, and of course all the economic operators in the country. So if you manage to succeed in delivering in that mix, you make a leap forward for your society.
Jens, Minister Stoltenberg, let me turn to you. I mean, here, Prime Minister Plenković essentially mentioned, in a sense, both, if you like, liberal values, as well as values that are indeed more rooted in culture and religion, as he was mentioning. Do you actually feel that there is a tension between these things?
Yes, to some extent, but I think that these are tensions we absolutely can live with. I think that one thing that makes Europe great is that we have different views, we have different opinions, we have different religions, we have different cultures, and we have been able to live together. And of course, there are problems, there are tensions, but fundamentally, I believe in that kind of diverse society that we all represent. And you also refer to our history in your introduction. We have not always been liberal. We have also done a lot of big mistakes. But let's
bad things.
Yes, but let's now focus on the good values and the good things, and accept that with these differences, Europe has achieved a lot of things. So that's a good thing. I think that in a way, the challenge for us now is that we are to some extent also mixing the issue of whether we can have different values, disagreements related to values, but at the same time realize that we have common interests. And I think that if you look at, for instance, NATO's history, there have been differences and also different values, at least different arguments on how to uphold those values and whether all allies and all countries were able to uphold them. But we have always been able to unite around the core responsibility to protect each other. So yes, the more we can agree on values, the better. But fundamentally, what really matters when it comes to security is that we are realizing that we have a common interest to protect and defend each other. And sometimes these issues are mixed. And of course, there is a relationship between values and interest. But I think the history of NATO and its friends demonstrates that there can be actually quite serious differences on values, but still we're able to rally around our common interests.
So here, basically, what Jens Stoltenberg is saying is that diversity and the management of that diversity is actually a key component in the sense of the values that we stand for. Now, this, Priti Patel, also brings us close to this very difficult debate that we're having, for instance, over migration, where on the one hand, indeed, there is this issue of the respect for diversity and the celebration of diversity. And yet, on the other hand, we are also hearing, again, going back to some of the things that we were hearing yesterday, that we need to be very careful about cancel culture and about the threat of mass migration. So again, how would you sort of fit these things together?
Well, first of all, I think we can do that, and we have to address the world as we find it, rather than looking backwards all the time to go forwards. And just on the point of values, before I come on to the migration issue, we actually have to fight for our values and stand up for our values, and that's incumbent upon people like me, politicians in particular. They're elected to represent our communities, our societies, our country. And we have to actually inform people as to why our values matter now, but also to future generations. And I say that as someone that was a teenager when I saw the Berlin Wall come down, and I think about the level of complacency that has really dominated our political culture and politics over recent decades. I've been in Parliament, by the way, for 10 years, so I guess I'm part of that too. But I've always been very steadfast and strident in what I stand for and my beliefs. Now, on the issue of migration, I actually have a few strong views about this because I am a former Home Secretary, and I was deeply criticised during my time for being too tough in terms of my policies, legislations, the approach that I tried to take forward on deterring illegal migrants to come to our country, and what that would also mean in terms of, guess what, public opinion and what they think about governments and how competent governments are perceived on delivering on fundamental issues like stronger borders, safer communities. We do have to tackle these issues, and we do have solutions to these challenges, and we as politicians should not shy away from them. There's a massive public debate in the United Kingdom, yet again, about all of this, but this time about legal and illegal migration. Now, in my view, strong politicians should not shy away from proposing policies, putting forward ideas, being propositional. And the one thing I would say on this, I did a bit of work in this area, as you can tell, is that we work with our allies on many of these issues too, because it's not just one country that suffers from these problems. It's a shared issue. So I spent a lot of time as Home Secretary actually trying to speak to European counterparts and allies saying, look, this will be a problem that's going to come to your territory even sooner, open borders, etc. So we have to be propositional and work together and find solutions. So I don't think this is about the cultural, it's too lazy and easy to sort of blame cultural anomalies and things of that nature. I think we have to be grown-up, mature politicians, be propositional and find solutions to these big challenges that confront us now and today, and that's how we win back and reclaim the values agenda that has defined the success and prosperity of our countries for a generation.
Franziska, essentially what we're hearing here is that, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Yes, there may be tensions, but these tensions between these different interpretations of values are actually manageable. Could I ask you perhaps, and I suppose yours is going to be a slightly more critical view on all of this, do you actually see contradictions between these things that are not reconcilable?
When I talk about values, I'm very traditional, because for me, our values are rooted in enlightenment. And enlightenment has a long history. It is about reason, about science, about dignity, about freedom of religion. It's about every human being having equal rights, independent of how she or he looks like. And I fundamentally believe that these values are still holding true today. I don't know if you know the citation by Elisabeth Badinter, a French philosopher. She said, enlightenment is not a period in history, it's a project. And I think it's the European project. And it used to be, and I still hope it is, also an American project, a universalist project about enlightenment. But let me also be clear, it's not about abstract values, but about very concrete individual freedoms. It's the freedom today of Ukrainians not to be bombed by Putin. It's the freedom of our citizens to make a choice without algorithmic manipulation. It's the trust in the system that elections will depend on the will of the people and not of the wealth of oligarchs. And that's what it's today about. It's very concrete. It's not abstract. But our values, for me, are very traditional and very enshrined in our history. There were terrible times we had in between. I don't want to go back there. And for me, it's not a trend, dignity, human dignity. It's really a promise worth fighting for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, this actually leads me to the second set of issues that I wanted to discuss, which is precisely, if these values are being threatened, who are they being threatened by? And I think there are different possible explanations to all of this. One, which actually we've discussed very little in this conference, the Spanish Prime Minister made several references to this, but very few actually then pick this up, is actually they are being threatened by our own inconsistencies, by our own hypocrisies, by our own double standards. It is us, basically, that are threatening those values. And this, I think, Jens, and I wanted to turn to you on this. This kind of brings us to our broader relationship with the, let's call it, so-called Global South. Is there an element about us restoring our credibility and reputation in the eyes of others in order to actually live up to our own values?
Yes, if you now are asking me about whether we should not, as I said, demonstrate double standards, but apply those values in all conflicts and all situations, the answer is yes. And I think that one of the challenges we have seen is, for instance, the conflict in the Middle East compared to Ukraine. There are huge differences, but it is about sovereignty and respecting international law. And therefore, my own country, Norway, we have been very clear, of course, in condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine and supporting Ukraine. But we have also been very clear that Israel is responsible for illegal occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. Again, two very different situations, but it undermines our credibility that we believe in these values if we are not clear when international law is violated, regardless of where it is violated and by whom. So then the answer is yes. Then I think that, of course, any double standard weakens the credibility of our values. And we need to be honest about ourselves, because I think we all have demonstrated that we are not always consistent, also my own country. But I think we must not forget that the most urgent, as I say, challenge to the values of freedom and democracy is what we see now on the front lines in Ukraine. There is no doubt that Ukraine has to prevail. The military support to Ukraine is so obviously the right thing to do for everyone that believes in democracy and freedom. So I'm not against the more advanced discussion about what we are not doing perfectly ourselves, but it should not overshadow the obvious and urgent need to stand up where really the front line is so clear as it is in Ukraine today.
And I think actually sort of emphasizing what you just said there, to an extent, there always has been and there always will be inconsistencies. But the worst possible way of addressing those inconsistencies is getting rid of standards altogether, which is the risk that one runs into. Franziska, turning to you, there is a second possible answer to who is actually threatening these values, and to use an expression used on the stage 1 year ago, but interpreting in a radically different sense, it is the enemy from within. It is anti-democratic forces in Europe which are actually threatening those values, that are raising the specter of returning not to the past that you were referring to, the past of enlightenment, but to a very dark past in European history. So is that what we should be worrying about?
I think it's almost impossible to distinguish or to separate completely outside and inside, because we see how well they do cooperate. Those who are traveling to see Putin are the ones in Germany internally threatening our democracy. And these are the links I think we have to talk about, that even if they call themselves an alternative for Germany, they're not patriots, they're not fighting for us, they're going to the Kremlin, which are not. So I think, we have to see how they work together and how they have joint goals of destroying liberal democracies, and that we have to make sure that the rule of the majority doesn't turn into the tyranny of majority. And that's, I think, a lot what it's about. And we see also how it works together and is amplified by the digital platforms and how their algorithms are used to, tear us apart, and how they make lies travel faster than the truth. And that's why I think we have, several challenges. And then we have homegrown challenges, like, making sure a state is functioning well, making sure education is working well, health is working well. So I think it's always multifaceted, but we must make the connections between inside and outside.
And Priti, turning to you on this, and perhaps a third possible answer, which is actually the opposite answer, is indeed, we may actually have a problem in Europe in terms of restricting free speech and, having gone too far down the woke route. Is that a threat to European values?
Well, I think first of all, I don't think anyone here will be surprised by my views on this, but, we just don't subscribe to, trying to be all things to all people, quite frankly. It's a lose-lose situation, and it's compromising. As a politician, I always say, if you sit on the fence, it's quite a painful proposition. You need clarity. And at a time, as I said earlier on, we live in a contested world. We have our own challenges in all our countries when it comes to what I see as subversion to our democracy and our democratic processes and what is going on in our politics. I want the right values to prevail, and we have to defend them. We've got to fight for them. We've got to be advocates and articulate the case for them. And that now cuts across absolutely everything. So inevitably, we focus here at MSc on defense and security. We can speak for hours about that. But also, what about our kids? What about the next generation? How do we, build the right pathways for them? So social media, in my country, we've got active discussions about bans for, if you're under 16, access to social media. I have schools in my own constituency and across our country. You go to school, at secondary school, they'll take away your mobile phone. You get them when the bell rings at the end of the day. This is about being responsible. And
Right, just to clarify, so you're in favor or against this?
no, so I'm supportive of that.
Okay.
But that is, but let me make my point. That's not encroaching upon free speech or things of that nature. That is about the values that we believe in and how we safeguard them, how we make them relevant to the lives that we live, and also the responsibilities that we should all be taking. And, you know, coming back to, I mean, you can use the woke word, describe it in whatever way you wish, but we do have too much, I think. I'm seeing it in my own country right now, but across other countries as well. And, you know, I think Secretary Rubio mentioned this as well. When you go down the route of trying to socialize every single facet of life, it does come with consequences. You know, when government's too big, when you've got, you know, what we describe back home as a nanny state, trying to dictate and all this kind of stuff, it then compromises values, individual responsibility, some of the determinations and the choices we should be making. And, you know, we believe in the freedom to succeed, you know, and how we can empower individuals to do the right thing and live their lives accordingly.
Prime Minister Andrei, let me turn to you here. And, of course, a fourth possible answer is, and Franziska and Jens, and in fact all of previous panelists actually mentioned this, is they are being threatened from outside. They're being threatened from outside, be it the threat, the obvious, in a sense, threat from Russia, or maybe from some also across the Atlantic. So there are a number of actors that are indeed trying to undermine what those values are. So is there a threat from outside? And perhaps above all, what should we do about it?
My analysis is that the most important political event that somehow swept across Europe happened 10 years ago. And that was the unprecedented migratory crisis. The 2015-16 migratory crisis changed political scenery across Europe. It had an impact on every single member state. In some of them faster, in some of them maybe with a sort of delayed effect, but it had an impact on strengthening the political parties who were, let's say, on the poles of the political spectrum. The mainstream parties had to react. Everybody gradually became more restrictive vis-à-vis migration. If nobody does it, then the people who fear the change of society, change of security, change of new type of streets in front of them, they wouldn't get any support of the voters. So I think we are still in the age where we are living on a daily basis the consequences of that event, including in the country where we are today. My second point is the incredibly fast advance of technology. I have 3 small kids. Their biggest enemy, and me being the villain in the house, is how to take away technology from their hands. The amount of,
almost everyone in this room,
in my view, wasted time on completely unnecessary content is something that everybody who has minor kids understands. I think this is becoming a crucial problem of how this will impact those who are very young today, what will be their Weltanschauung in 15, 20 years, having been fed so early with so many strange and unnecessary information. The third element is the external influence on our societies. We have seen it, it's not a novel thing. The impact first through the classical media, through opinion makers, through commentators, through analysts, specialists, then through internet sources, unreliable websites. I will tell you, I was a diplomat 21 years ago who changed posts from Brussels to Paris 3 months before the referendum in France on the constitutional treaty. For me, that was the most eye-opening moment, I was 35 at the time, to understand how the false information campaign can impact the society of a country who at the time had one of their most intellectually respected presidents in the history, which was Giscard d'Estaing, who was, if you remember, chairing the Convention on the Future of Europe, the Turtle, made the treaty. The debate where every single politician in France at least wrote a booklet, if not a book, about Europe. And then 15 million French votes against something that the French benefited the most until that moment. And that was another turning point for Europe. After that, the Dutch were the worst in terms of results. And the glue that was connecting Europe from the founding states' point of view was never as strong as it was before. And we still see consequences of these events. So, in my view, the external influence on the democratic process, wherever it comes from, it's present. We can be very sure it will be even stronger in the future than it is today. And that is where our democratic resilience is a test that we all have to endure and deliver upon and be the voice of truth, facts, reason, our own political platforms, whether we believe in similar projects from one way or another, left or right or center. But this is the huge task and a very difficult task, because the young generation, they don't watch television, they don't listen to the radio, nobody buys papers, nobody buys weekly. This is my first question when we have the youth events. In a crowd like this, who buys the papers? One or two. What do you buy? The Gazzetta dello Sport, because I play volleyball, so I want to see how I did well. And that is everywhere applicable. I mean, it's not only my country, it's everywhere like that. So I think we need to adapt to a mindset of the information being fed to the future leaders, businessmen, voters, workers, whoever it is. Their mindset is completely different than for those who grew up without internet. And in my view, this is the biggest, I wouldn't say a threat, but a challenge that we have to work upon.
Francisca, you wanted to come on this.
You know, I very much believe, as you just said, Prime Minister, that it's about destroying truth. And as Hannah Arendt had said, the best subject of totalitarian forces is the person who can no longer differentiate between truth and fiction. It's the basis for fascism. And I think we have to see that this is what's happening now with lies, and I don't call them fake news anymore because they're lies. I'm like, you don't teach your child, don't use fake news. You tell them, don't lie. So we should speak the truth again about what is happening. And we see that this is fueled by the tech brothers who make money out of it. I'm like, it's a business model. But it has a value behind it. And I think, we as Europeans, we have given ourselves laws to make those actors respect our own, laws that we have in an analog world, and we don't implement them strongly enough. And this is what Trump every time is saying, do not implement these laws. And I think we as Europeans have one responsibility, which is very important for the future of our democracy, is to implement these laws and not to be afraid of Trump.
So I think this is actually a good moment to open this up, and as is tradition here at the Munich Security Conference, the first word goes to a Munich young leader. So let me turn to Marina Penciu-Capranu from the permanent representative of Romania to NATO. Please, Marina. Mic here, please. Second row.
Thank you for this honor. First, I would just like to say I'm really honored to be here as a Munich young leader together with my colleagues. As for the question I would like to address, I would like to touch upon the threats from within you were mentioning, and pinpoint to another elephant that has been in our living room for a while now. That is the fact that we have been taking values such as democracy, peace, security for granted for a long time now, not just by my generation who was born in peaceful times, but for many of us. So with this in mind, and also the overall impact of the war in Ukraine, I was interested to know which are the pillars on which you think Europe's promise for the future should be based. Thank you.
Jens, let me perhaps turn to you with that question.
But in one way, I think we have addressed that from the beginning of this panel. And of course, for all of us who believe in the liberal democratic values, it is about the rule of law, it is about democracy, it is about the freedom of press. And of course, part of freedom of press and free expression is also then to fight fake news or lies and to implement the regulations we need to protect information and protect the truth. So I think for at least this panel, that's quite easy. We all agree on that. The more difficult issue is when we see that not all friends and allies and countries agree exactly on how to live up to those standards. And then I think that the different institutions we have, the European Union, NATO, the Munich Security Conference, there are many different platforms. We should perhaps be more honest and more transparent and more direct in criticizing friends when we see that they don't live up to those values in the way at least some of us believe are the right ways to live up to those values. And I think that there are many aspects, but one extremely important aspect is to defend a free and independent press. I have been in politics. I have possessed power since for decades, and sometimes I think it's very annoying to have journalists looking into what I'm doing and asking me the difficult questions. But I realize that the day that stops, then we are really on a dangerous path. So even if they are a bit annoying, I'm heavily in favor of critical journalists asking the difficult questions, because the alternative is really a dangerous path. So these are the difficult issues. How do we ensure that we have a free and independent press? How do we fight the fake news or the lies? To agree to those values is the easiest thing. To do it in praxis, it's a more difficult challenge.
Thank you. I have a question here on the third row.
Lisa Yasko, member of the Parliament of Ukraine. I'm very happy that this discussion is happening about European dream, because I always had an impression that in Ukraine we talk about this so much more than in most of the countries in Europe. And I'm very happy that this panel is devoted to that. Recently, I personally see very big shift in existential identity of Europe, when Europe is not taking only as economic union, but more than that. So my question is, how do you see the idea of Europe of the future, and what kind of soft power, because we definitely need hard power with security for peace and everything, but what would be that soft power that really can be promoted on behalf of every country? Because just, for instance, supporting independent media is great, but there is also a danger when the state is supporting everything. Sometimes you actually can support also some things that may promote terrorism in the end of the day. So you have to be very careful. So where is that line, and what the soft power can be used for the idea of Europe of the future?
So what exactly should we be supporting? Priti, do you want to take this? And maybe
I'll give some views and some thoughts, because I began my remarks earlier on by saying, we have to look at the world that we live in right now and make ourselves match fit and fit for the future. And I have to say, the endurance of Ukraine, what your country and your people are experiencing, should really make us all stand up and really come forward to be champions of the shared values and the norms that we all fundamentally believe. And I think we are doing that. You mentioned hard power. Clearly that is there. We know it's not enough right now. But on the soft power front, and I come from a country that's always been there in terms of soft power. It's not just a cultural nice to do things, but actually it's how you build capacity in countries, defend democracy, hard power and soft power. We can do that through many of our institutions, our initiatives, our joint collaborations. And I genuinely believe, I think we're slipping back on that. And that's exactly where the axis of authoritarian countries then come in. That's how they work to subvert democracy through the internet, through the cyber attacks, all those types of things. we're quite good, if I may say so, across European countries in terms of building capacity, knowledge, skills. That's an investment. That's not a nice to do. And I think, to be quite candid, I see this in my own country. It's being stripped back, it's being forgotten. I've been involved in that in the past. That's where we need to bring our cooperation together and really bolster that.
Yeah, first of all, allow me to say that I want to thank all Ukrainians who are fighting for their freedom, but also for our freedom. And I really, it is, I feel, whenever I'm, in Ukraine, I feel very European and I feel remembered about what Europe is about. And I call on all who are in the room who have capacity to defend Europe and Ukraine better, fight the shadow fleet better, help in air defense. We really have an interest to fight in the first line for our freedom. And when you talk about, what Europe's soft power is, yes, we need more hard power. By the way, I have been arguing for this for many years, Natalie, you know that. When it still was called I'm an anti-transatlanticist, I was like, no, it goes hand in hand. The Americans will only respect us if we are strong, and they ask us to be stronger militarily. But on the soft power side, I think we need to invest in technologies. We really need to be much more attractive, faster, more innovative, make those forces in Europe. We have such wonderful people, allow them, to thrive, to come out with their best ideas, show that democracy delivers better for citizens than totalitarian rule. We have to prove this. And I think this is the most formidable soft power we can have, is to prove this, that lives of every single citizen will be better in a democratic system. And we're not living up to this every day, but we really have to. And I also believe that we have this soft power of showing that unity works. Europe united can work, that we can defend ourselves better if we work together. And that's also a soft power against those who just say it's about zero-sum interests. Either you lose, you win. There's no merit in working together. And I think that is also an idea that Europe stands for, that you can all win by working together.
Andrew, you wanted to say something on this?
Just a few comments as a friend of Ukraine, and thank you very much for this comment, first of all, and the appreciation that over the past 4 years and next week or the week after, we will witness the 4th anniversary of incredible resistance of Ukraine to Russia's aggression, and you managed to fend off accusations of Nazification, Ukraine that needs the Nazification, accusation of not having a proper identity, meaning who are Ukrainians, using the other name 4 years ago, remember, and basically putting back the European security order to pre-1997. This is the key element of Putin's aggressive policy against Ukraine. But you mentioned of Europe today, whether it's a soft power or are we talking about the values. I think there is a very vivid debate about all of it, but there is also a very much experienced, grown understanding that the European Union, which was forged, I would say, as an economic integration project, but through law, which is critical. The law is the main glue that puts us all together, and that entails values of how we see our society being regulated, is now so clearly strengthening its capabilities when it comes to defense, that this is a different organization compared to what it was, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years ago, with Solana security strategy. I think it was in 2003, you remember it well. We've gone, I don't know, not 7 miles, but 777 miles ahead. And
7,000 to go still.
Yes, but and one main point where the soft power of the EU is essential, that is the implementation of the most important value, which we haven't mentioned today, and this is about the values, this is the generally Christian, but also societal value of solidarity. Solidarity is everywhere, in every single European Union policy, in budget, in agriculture, in cohesion, in regional development, in external policies, in helping Ukraine. It's absolutely everywhere. In my experience, it is perhaps the most important value that brings us together. Otherwise, the whole concept would have been long ago dismantled. This is the strength that we have and that Ukraine shares. And a lot of respect to you, and congratulations to the MSC for having awarded Ukrainian people the award last night.
So I have three very final questions. Titi, and then there were two questions here at the back. I'll take them all together, and then we'll have a final round of replies.
Thank you, Natalie. Great panel, very vital. It's crucial that we discuss values. My name is Tytti Tuppurainen. I'm from Finland. And what Prime Minister said in his initial words, the values that he listed, they are actually values that are treaty-based in the European Union. It is European law. These values are not a matter of opinion, they are not optional, but it's European legislation. And we have instruments even to enforce them. Conditionality, Article 7, and so on. Now, yesterday, we heard from Secretary Rubio that United States wants to embrace Europe with very different values. To me, it was a fatal embrace. They are values that Europe should, in my opinion, reject. So my question to this panel would be that, given that the transatlantic relationship is so important to current United States administration, as Rubio said, wouldn't it allow us to be a bit more assertive when defending our own values? Should we adopt a more values-based, more assertive values-based approach vis-à-vis United States? Thank you.
Great, thank you. And final question, actually, only have time for one gentleman there at the end. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry, apologies.
My name is Nubar Fain, I'm from the United States, and this topic hasn't come up, but I heard about enlightenment and I heard about truth-based argumentation. I want to raise the topic as part of the values Europe can protect, the notion of science and the scientific method leading to science-based policies, which in my country are being completely undermined for the first time in my last 2 generations at least. So I'd like to ask, what can Europe do in the scientific establishment to fight back against the notion that opinion should be put up against fact, and going back to where authority or superstition can cause the populace to not know what to do with their health or their food or their climate issues, etc. So there just seems to be a total dearth of discussion on the scientific method and defending it, which should really have no borders. We're busy talking about defense, but we're not talking about the underlying engine of progress.
Great, thank you. And a very quick round of replies. Francisca, let me start with you.
Yeah, I very much agree. By the way, I'm very happy we have a lot of American scientists coming to my hometown, for example, Heidelberg, and helping us to work on Alzheimer on many things, because you have a health minister who believes in no science. And it will strengthen Europe, if I may say so. It's a pity for the US. But, you know, in order to, and I want to combine the two answers, we have to be more assertive. I said first, let's be more independent digitally, work on our own actors, and then implement our rules in the digital sphere. It's the number one to protect truth and scientific order. Second, we have to be more defendant on the military side. We have been speaking about this all weekend. And third, I think we need to be more independent on fossil gas and oil and gas, also from the US. I don't want to wake up one morning and Trump saying to me, if you don't stop the digital laws, you will get only your LNG gas and 20% plus, or you will get half of the gas only. I don't want to be in that situation. So we have to work on our independence there too. And last point, I think we can only do this as Europeans if there is strong access between France and Germany and Poland. And I've been worrying the last couple of weeks that I don't see that access working well. And there will be no future of Europe against France, against Poland, only with them together. And I think that's our job in Germany, to work on this.
Thank you. Pretty.
So very briefly, let me just touch on the main point about values and assertiveness. I actually believe in sovereign states, and all of us are capable when it comes to whether it's a scientific base, a technology base, a defense base, for absolutely standing on our own 2 feet, but not in isolation, by working together in cooperation. And, you know, if I come back to Secretary Rubio's speech, he's also telling us to do more. And there is something about not always looking to Uncle Sam to sort of be the backstop. Now, I agree with that to a certain extent. But what we must do is ensure that we're not dependent. This is the crucial thing. And collectively, and on this stage and in this room at this conference, between us, we're capable of doing so much more. We really are. And actually being leaders, pioneers, innovators, you know, being at the front of the queue on so many things. And I think that's really where we need to concentrate our energies and not get sucked into this sort of like doom loop of regressive talk against each other's countries and nations.
Jens.
I've spent 10 years trying to keep North America and Europe together as Secretary General of NATO, and that's not always an easy task. And then on this issue of assertiveness, when we disagree with the United States, I think that it is important to act and speak in a way that try to keep this family together and also work with friends all over the world. But I think at the same time, as friends and as allies, we have to be very clear when some core values are threatened or challenged. And for instance, on Greenland, many European countries, Norway, said very clearly it is unacceptable to claim the territory of another country. And we said that to our strongest ally. And I think that was the right thing to do. So sometimes we have to be very clear, especially when these core values are challenged. And therefore, but it's not only about clarity and saying what we think, but it's also about finding a way to address the problem. And the good news now is that we are in a better place now than we just were a few weeks ago, because now there is actually an ongoing process between Greenland, Denmark, and the United States to address the issues that has been raised, and hopefully we'll find a way to sort it out and continue to be together in this big transatlantic family.
Great, thank you. Andre, final word.
Difficult to add when you're fourth, something to what very smartly colleagues concluded, but just on the relationship with the United States. I think that after Davos and having analyzed the first day and then the second day and here the atmosphere, I think we are in a far better direction than we were before, which is a good point. And I think there is a lot of pragmatism and a good sense of solidarity among the EU member states on the core issues, just as Jens has said. And it's very clear in all our debates at the European Council, basically the solidarity is to the maximum. And I think we need to be assertive. I agree with this point about our values and our interests, to formulate them in a way which is, I would say, one of the best features of Europe, and that is in a respectful manner. Respectful manner. I think that the methodology, how we operate now in the changing world, is very important, how this generation shall be seen in the future. Assertive, but respectful, protecting what we stand for. And I think that gradually things will evolve in the direction that democracies prefer.
Well, I think this has been a wonderful conversation, and I really do think that this values discussion is at the core of really many of the things that we're talking about. And my big takeaway from this discussion is that values are central, but they're really part and parcel of respect and solidarity and cooperation and unity and independence. And it's only if we actually work on all of these things together that we can actually ensure that our values prevail. Thank you very much to all of you.